Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, what we're about to do is have a discussion about whether or not the United States of America should start exporting our oil. Exporting our oil. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the United States right now, along with China, is the largest importer of oil in the world. We are not exactly at, but very near to, the level of imports of oil in our country that we were back in 1975 when we put a ban on the exportation of oil in our country. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important for a lot of reasons. Number one, if we begin to export our oil in the United States, a new Barclays report found that the United States consumer last year saved $11.4 billion at the pump because of the lowest United States crude prices in a long time, and that we would potentially save upwards of $10 billion in prices for consumers at the pump in the United States of America. Now, we understand the oil industry. Here's what happens. The world price is set, it's called the Brent price. The Brent price is the world price of oil. That price is traditionally higher, much higher than the price of crude oil in the United States that's produced in the United States. That's West Texas Intermediate. That's a price set in Cushing, Oklahoma. Now, if you're an oil company, you want to get our U.S. crude out onto the world market because they will then be able to sell it for a much higher price. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is the American consumers won't get that oil at the lower price. And we'll still have to import oil into our country because we are still short by millions of barrels of oil per day. So the consumer in America is the one who will be paying this tax on their price at the pump. That's the essence of what this whole strategy is about. It's to get the oil companies the highest price of the oil, for oil, which is on the world market. But who's going to pay? Who's going to have their pockets tipped upside down at the pump and have money shaken out of it so that they have to pay a higher price? It'll be the consumers. You know, if we want to give more money to the defense budget, let's just do it. Let's have a big debate about increasing the defense budget. Let's have that debate. But let's not have the American consumer at the pump be a special tax that's imposed in order to help our allies overseas. Because ultimately, of course, there's a beautiful access there where the oil industry is going, yes, sir, we're willing to put our crude oil on ships and send it overseas. It's just a bad, bad economic policy for our country. We're already paying a high price at home. So this exportation of our oil would also defy what our own Department of Energy is saying. Our Department of Energy is saying that in 2020, our oil production in America is going to peak, and then we're going to begin to go down once again in our oil production. Who is saying this? Our government. Who is saying this? The Energy Information Agency of the United States of America. So what we're engaging in here is a premature attempt to export oil with the likelihood that by 2019 and 2020, our oil production is going to start to go down again. It also hurts our domestic oil refining industry. The Energy Information Administration has found that by lifting this ban on the exportation of our own domestic crude could lead to a fundamental reduction in the amount of investment made by the American refining industry here on our own soil. $9 billion less would be invested because the oil would be sent overseas. The crude oil would get refined overseas. It wouldn't be refined here in our own country with American workers and American companies doing it here on our own soil, helping our economy here. This decision, by the way, that members are going to be asked to make today is opposed by the AFL-CIO, it's opposed by the steel workers, it's opposed by the League of Conservation Voters, by the Sierra Club, by Public Citizen, and by an entire group of American refiners. So this is no radical coalition that's been put together. It's about as broad a base of interest in our own country that wants to make America stronger. And how in the world can we be strong if we're exporting oil while we're still importing oil? Because we'll have to import the same amount that we're now exporting under this amendment that is being made by the senator from Texas, and we'll wind up with ultimately the price being paid by the American consumer at the pump. And so, from my perspective, this is about as kind of desperate an attempt which the oil industry can have to get out from underneath the 1975 law. They've been looking for an opportunity. But obviously, the instability in the Middle East should make us very cautious at this time. The oil fields of Saudi Arabia are now very vulnerable. They're right on the border. The Houthi, being supported by Iran, right at the bottom of the Red Sea, makes that juncture very vulnerable to a cutoff of oil coming into the world economy. This Shiite-Sunni war is something that we have to be very conscious of because ISIS is targeting those areas in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen that have oil resources. We need a big debate in our country about oil and war in the Middle East. We're at a pivotal point here where the Ottoman Empire and all of the lines that were drawn back 100 years ago are being erased, and with it, the protection of oil resources in the Middle East. We should just not have a debate out here on the Senate floor about cavalierly lifting the ban on the exportation of oil. We should have a debate about what this war in country after country, in oil area after oil area means for our country. And I would say to you that we should err in a way that's going to protect our own economy. That's what makes us strong. That's what makes it possible for us to project the power around the world. It is that we are the strongest economy in the world. And the indispensable life's blood of economic growth is low energy cost for every single industry and every single consumer. It puts more money in their pockets. This decision that the gentleman from Texas amendment asked us to make will send us in the wrong direction. So, this is a disaster for consumers in our country. It is a disaster for the refiners in our country. And it is a disaster for the national security of our country. We should keep our resources here at home for American families, American businesses, to enhance our national security using America and our economy as the basis for how we project power around the world. For every barrel of oil that we export, we're going to have to import another barrel of oil from some other place. We should have the debate here on the Senate floor about where that oil will be coming back into our country, because we still need 3-4 million extra barrels of oil a day. That's a national security consideration that we have to deal with. Which country are we going to call up? Which country are we going to ask to send us their oil? What are the implications for our national security of having a phone call go to country after country, probably not just the oil companies, but our government, beginning new negotiations to get even more oil coming here as we export the oil that we should be keeping here. The Saudis have been our friends historically. We have no guarantee that the Saudis are going to even be running that country. Let's be honest about it. Let's talk about that. Let's debate it. ISIS has taken over oil fields in Syria. ISIS has taken over areas of oil production in Iraq. Let's have a debate about that. That's what we should be debating. How is that oil now funding ISIS? How is that oil now being used by Iran, potentially, in Yemen, in other parts of the world, to undermine American interests? In one part of the world, in Yemen, we want to back the Sunnis against the Shiites. In Iran, we're backing moderate Sunnis against Shiites. In Iraq, we're backing the Shiites against radical Sunnis, trying to get moderate Sunnis to help us. All of it, by the way, with oil as, if not the, then one of these central issues in each one of these countries. To have a resolution here today to be saying we should be exporting oil? No, ladies and gentlemen, that's not how we should be discussing this issue. How did we get into the Middle East? We got into the Middle East, yes, protecting Israel, but we got in because of our addiction to oil. Not my words, President Bush's words. We have to break our dependence upon imported oil. Increasing fuel economy standards, that's a big part of it. Having this fracking revolution continue to produce more oil here domestically, that's a big part of it. Investing in renewables and energy efficiency, that's a big part of it. But we're still at the earliest stages of this strategy. When we've completed it, when we know we're successful, then let's talk about the generosity that we're going to expect from American consumers at the pump to pay higher prices for gasoline. So again, this is an issue that the American people overwhelmingly want to see resolved in a way that keeps American oil in America. If we're going to continue to export young men and women from America over to the Middle East, then we should not be exporting our oil at the same time. That makes no sense. No sense. And it's disrespectful to the sacrifice young men and women are making over in the Middle East in order to protect our interests, to start an economic policy of exporting imported oil while we still need to import it. So this issue, to me, is central to our overall long-term national security and economic interests, and I urge an aye vote on the amendment, and I ask for a roll call on the amendment, Madam President.